to trust her. Nia saying proof could be built by liars. Nia walking away without defending herself any longer because she realized he had already chosen the documents over her heart. He remembered the tiny object falling onto the carpet that day. The little baby shoes. His breathing caught. Baby shoes. She hadn't reached into her purse searching for evidence. She had been preparing to tell him something. Something he had never allowed her to say. Rowan slowly lowered himself into a chair. She was pregnant. Grant frowned. Sir? Rowan looked at nothing. She was pregnant that day. Silence swallowed the room. Then another thought struck him with terrifying force. 3 children. The birthdays. The timing. The resemblance. His voice became barely audible. Those children. Before he finished, the legal archive computer chimed again. Another recovered file had completed synchronization. Grant opened it. It contained an internal communication log between Vivian Mercer and the cybersecurity contractor she had secretly hired years earlier. Most of the messages had been deleted. A few fragments remained. Remove backup footage before audit. Ensure investigation reaches compliance before server refresh. He must never question the evidence. Rowan stared at the final sentence. He must never question the evidence. For the first time in years, the billionaire who never lost control punched the conference table with such force the wood cracked beneath his fist. I destroyed her life. No, sir, Grant answered quietly. Someone manipulated yours too. Rowan looked at him with hollow eyes. That doesn't erase what I did. Across town, Nia sat in her hotel suite, preparing for the next day's negotiations. She reviewed technical documents while speaking with the triplets over a video call. Micah proudly displayed a toy rocket he had built with Eleanor. Mara showed the painting she had finished that afternoon. Elias simply smiled. When are you coming home? He asked. Soon? Promise? I promise. Eleanor appeared behind them, carrying warm cookies. Don't worry about us, she told Nia. Take care of whatever brought you back there. Nia smiled gratefully before ending the call. The room suddenly felt much quieter. She looked toward the city lights beyond the window. Returning to Bellhaven had stirred emotions she thought were buried forever. Seeing Rowan again had reopened memories she had carefully locked away. She hated that a small part of her still searched for the man she once loved inside the stranger he had become. A knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door, expecting room service. Instead, she found Rowan standing alone. His suit jacket was gone. His tie hung loose. His eyes looked exhausted. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, Rowan whispered, "May I come in?" Nia hesitated before stepping aside. He entered slowly, looking around the quiet room. Everything felt unfamiliar. Everything except her. She waited. Rowan struggled to find words. Billion-dollar negotiations had always come easily. This conversation felt impossible. I know, he finally said. Nia frowned. Know what? He swallowed hard. You were innocent. She didn't react. She simply watched him. Rowan continued. The archive recovered the original access logs. Vivian manipulated the investigation. Still no response. Only silence. Rowan's voice broke. I was wrong. Nia lowered her eyes. Yes. I should have trusted you. Yes. I failed you. Another quiet yes hung between them. Rowan took one careful step forward. Were you pregnant? The room became perfectly still. Nia slowly looked back at him. There was no anger in her face now. Only deep sadness. She answered with one word. I was. Rowan felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath him. The children. Nia's eyes filled with tears. She refused to release. You don't get to ask that question tonight. He nodded slowly. You're right. She folded her arms. Do you know what hurt the most? Rowan couldn't answer. It wasn't losing my job. Her voice remained calm. It wasn't leaving the country. It wasn't raising 3 babies alone. She paused. It was realizing that the one person whose trust meant everything to me never gave it when it mattered most. Rowan lowered his head. Every word landed like truth carved into stone. I'm sorry. She smiled sadly. Sorry doesn't give children their father. His eyes closed. She continued gently. Sorry doesn't give a frightened pregnant woman someone to hold her hand during 3 difficult births. Another pause. Sorry doesn't erase 5 birthdays. Rowan felt tears sting his eyes for the first time since his mother's funeral. I know. No, Nia whispered. You don't. She walked toward the door and opened it. Please leave. Rowan didn't argue. He understood he had lost the right to ask for more. As he reached the doorway, Nia quietly spoke again. They ask about you. Rowan turned slowly. What? Every birthday, every school performance, every holiday. Her voice trembled for the first time. They always ask if their father would be proud of them. Rowan covered his mouth as emotion finally overwhelmed him. Nia looked away before she could lose her composure. Good night, Mr. Ashcroft. The door closed softly. Rowan remained standing in the hallway long after she was gone. Inside the room, Nia finally allowed herself to cry. Not because she regretted telling him the truth, because after carrying the weight alone for 5 years, speaking it aloud somehow made it heavier. Downstairs, hidden in the underground parking garage, Vivian Mercer watched security footage from her car. She had seen Rowan enter Nia's hotel. She had seen him leave nearly an hour later, looking completely broken. Panic tightened around her chest. If Rowan knew the truth, everything she had built was about to collapse. She reached into her purse and removed a second phone that no one knew existed. She dialed one number. "It's time," she said coldly. "Activate the contingency plan." "Are you certain?" the voice asked. Vivian stared toward the hotel entrance where Rowan disappeared into the night. "If I lose everything," she whispered, "they're losing everything too." She ended the call without realizing that someone standing only a few cars away had heard every word. Grant Holloway quietly lowered his phone after recording the entire conversation, and for the first time in 5 years, someone finally possessed proof that could bring the entire conspiracy crashing down. Grant Holloway didn't move until Vivian's car disappeared into the darkness. Only then did he look down at the recording on his phone. Every word had been captured clearly. "Activate the contingency plan. If I lose everything, they're losing everything too." He immediately encrypted the file and sent copies to 3 different secure locations before calling Rowan. "Sir," he said the moment Rowan answered. "She's making another move." Rowan listened in silence as Grant explained everything. By the end of the call, there was no hesitation left in his voice. "Bring the recording to the board meeting tomorrow morning. No delays, no shortcuts. This ends now." Dawn arrived beneath heavy gray clouds. Inside Ashcroft headquarters, every board member had been summoned for an emergency session before the Global Innovation Alliance announced the final contract decision. No one understood why. Rumors spread through every department. Vivian entered the executive floor wearing the same flawless confidence she had practiced for years. She smiled at assistants. She greeted directors. She even asked Rowan whether he had slept well. He looked at her without emotion. "We'll talk inside." Something about his voice made her stomach tighten. Across the city, Nia packed her suitcase, believing the summit had accomplished everything she came to do. Lumera's proposal had impressed the committee. She had no reason to remain in Bellhaven after the final announcement. Her assistant entered carrying fresh coffee. "Your driver is ready whenever you are." Before Nia could answer, another knock sounded at the door. Grant Holloway stood outside. "Miss Ellison," he said respectfully, "Mr. Ashcroft asked me to deliver something." She almost refused. Then she noticed the expression on his face. It wasn't business. It was regret. He handed her a tablet. "Please watch this before making any decision." Nia pressed play. Vivian's voice filled the room. "Activate the contingency plan. If I lose everything, they're losing everything too." The recording ended. Grant quietly placed another folder beside it. Restored security logs. Archived communications. Recovered access records. Enough evidence to erase every accusation made against her 5 years earlier. Nia slowly sat down. She wasn't surprised anymore. Somehow that realization hurt most of all. "He knows?" she asked. Grant nodded. "Everything." Nia looked toward the window. Bellhaven appeared exactly as it had 5 years ago. Only she had changed. "What happens now?" Grant answered honestly. "That depends on whether justice is enough." At headquarters, the emergency board meeting began. Rowan stood before the directors without notes, without slides, without prepared remarks. "5 years ago," he began, "this company destroyed an innocent employee." The room fell silent. Vivian's smile disappeared. Rowan continued. "That employee was framed through fabricated evidence, manipulated investigations, and unauthorized access to executive systems." Several directors exchanged confused looks. Vivian slowly stood. "Rowan, perhaps legal should review whatever misunderstanding." "Sit down," his voice echoed across the room. She froze. Grant entered carrying multiple evidence folders. Each board member received identical copies. Restored audit logs, cybersecurity reports, authentication records, voice recordings, independent forensic verification. Every page strengthened the last. By the time the directors finished reading, Disbelief had turned into outrage. One elderly board member removed his glasses. Director Mercer, is any of this inaccurate? Vivian looked around the room. Every face that once admired her now searched for answers. She tried one final performance. Tears filled her eyes. I loved this company. Rowan answered quietly. You loved control. She turned toward him. I did everything for you. No, he replied. You did everything to own me. She laughed bitterly. She took you away from me. Rowan stared at her. I was never yours. Her carefully constructed composure shattered. You noticed her on her first day. She pointed toward him with trembling hands. Do you remember the janitor? The interview? The late nights? I watched you fall in love, while pretending I didn't exist. No one interrupted. She continued speaking, years of obsession pouring out at once. She wasn't better than me, Rowan answered gently. She never tried to compete with you. Vivian's breathing became uneven. She would have left eventually. She never did, Rowan said. I forced her to. Silence followed. Then the chairman spoke. Director Mercer, effective immediately. You are removed from all executive authority pending criminal prosecution. Security approached. Vivian didn't resist. As they escorted her toward the door, she looked back one final time. You'll never fix what you broke, Rowan. The door closed behind her. Rowan remained standing in complete silence, because for once she had spoken the truth. Some things could never be repaired. Hours later, the Global Innovation Alliance announced the final contract. Instead of selecting only one company, the committee surprised everyone. Healthcare should never be a competition, the chairperson announced. We are awarding a strategic partnership to both Ashcroft Quantum Systems and Lumera Biotech Solutions. The audience erupted in applause. Rowan looked toward Nia across the stage. She accepted the award politely, but avoided his eyes. After the ceremony, he finally approached her again. I don't deserve another conversation. No, she admitted. You don't, he nodded. But there are 3 children who deserve the truth. Nia remained silent. Rowan continued carefully. I'm not asking you to forgive me. She looked at him for the first time. Good. I'm asking whether they know my name. Nia hesitated. They know your first name. His voice became almost a whisper. Do they know I'm their father? She looked away. They guessed. Rowan closed his eyes. May I ask why you never told them? Because I refused to teach them to hate someone they had never met. He swallowed hard. Thank you. Tears gathered in his eyes again. You protected me when I didn't deserve it. Nia answered softly. I protected them. A long silence settled between them before Rowan asked the question that terrified him most. Would they even want to meet me? Nia didn't answer immediately. She thought about 5 birthdays, 3 first days of school, 3 frightened children asking why other families looked different, 3 little hearts that still believed somewhere in the world their father might simply be lost instead of absent. Finally, she spoke. That decision belongs to them. Rowan nodded. Then let them choose. 2 days later, a private jet landed quietly in Norhaven. Rowan sat beside Nia during the flight. Most of the journey passed in silence. Neither knew how to speak around years that could never be recovered. As the car approached Eleanor Voss's seaside home, Rowan's heartbeat became almost unbearable. Children's laughter floated through the open windows. Micah raced across the garden chasing a bright yellow kite. Mara sat beneath a tree painting seashells. Elias carefully helped Eleanor water flowers with a tiny green watering can. Rowan stopped walking. They were real. His children. His family. 5 years had been stolen from all of them. Nia looked at him. Remember? He nodded slowly. They owe me nothing. She opened the garden gate. Micah looked up first. Mom! The 3 children ran toward her together, before suddenly noticing the unfamiliar man standing nearby. Elias tilted his head. Mara squeezed Nia's hand. Micah studied Rowan with open curiosity. Mom? He asked quietly. Is this him? Rowan felt every breath leave his body, as Nia looked at the children she had raised with endless love. She knelt until her eyes met theirs. Then, with tears shining in the afternoon sunlight, she answered the question they had waited 5 years to hear. Yes, yes. The single word settled over the garden like the gentle breeze coming from the sea. None of the children spoke immediately. Micah looked at Rowan with open curiosity. Mara studied his face as though comparing it with memories she didn't know she possessed. Elias remained closest to Nia, his small fingers wrapped around her hand. Rowan stood completely still. He had negotiated with presidents and billionaires without fear, but 3 little children had reduced him to silence. He didn't want to frighten them. He didn't want to rush them. He simply wanted the chance he had thrown away before they were even born. Micah finally took one cautious step forward. "You're our dad?" Rowan swallowed hard. "Yes." Another pause. "I'm Rowan." The little boy frowned innocently. "Mom already told us your name." Nia couldn't help smiling through her tears. Mara looked at Rowan carefully. "Did you know about us?" The question struck him like a blade. He refused to lie. "No." The children exchanged confused glances. Elias spoke so quietly, Rowan almost didn't hear him. "Did you not want us?" Nia immediately knelt beside him. "Elias?" But Rowan gently raised one hand. "Let me answer." He lowered himself onto one knee so he wasn't looking down at them. "I didn't know you existed." His voice trembled. "Someone lied to me. A very bad lie. And because I believed it, I lost 5 years with the 3 greatest gifts I never knew I had." The children listened without fully understanding the weight behind his words. Micah tilted his head. "So, you're sad?" Rowan laughed softly through tears. "Very." Micah looked at his brother and sister before walking closer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small polished seashell. "Whenever Mara cries, we give her something pretty." He held the shell toward Rowan. "Maybe this will help." Rowan stared at the tiny shell before accepting it with shaking hands. No business award. No billion-dollar acquisition. No public honor had ever meant as much as that simple gift. "Thank you," he whispered. Mara suddenly stepped forward. "Mom says people who tell the truth deserve another chance." She looked at Nia. "Is that still true?" Nia met her daughter's eyes. She had spent 5 years teaching her children compassion without allowing it to become weakness. She answered honestly, "Sometimes." Mara nodded. Then she quietly hugged Rowan around the shoulders. He froze before slowly wrapping his arms around her with unbelievable care. His daughter, the little girl he had missed, holding from the very first moment of her life. Elias watched for several seconds before walking over too. He didn't hug Rowan. Instead, he took his hand. "You have big hands," Rowan smiled. "So do you." Elias placed his tiny palm against Rowan's. They fit almost perfectly. "Cool," he whispered. Finally, Micah climbed onto Rowan's lap, as naturally as though years had never been stolen. "Can you fly kites?" he asked. "I can learn," Rowan answered. "Good, because mine always crashes." Nia stood quietly beside Eleanor Voss, both women watching the impossible scene unfold. Eleanor smiled. "Children forgive much faster than adults." Nia nodded. "Because they haven't learned to protect themselves yet." Eleanor looked toward Rowan, laughing softly, as Micah insisted on teaching him the correct way to hold the kite string. "Maybe he'll spend the rest of his life earning what they just gave him in 5 minutes." Nia answered without taking her eyes off the garden. "He should." The following weeks became something none of them expected. Rowan extended his stay in Norhaven indefinitely. The board of Ashcroft Quantum Systems objected at first, until Rowan appointed an interim executive committee and began leading remotely. He no longer measured success by quarterly reports. He measured it by breakfast conversations, bedtime stories, and afternoons spent discovering everything he had missed. He learned that Mara loved painting storms because she believed sunshine looked brighter afterward. He learned Elias secretly counted stars every night, before sleeping, because he wanted to make sure none disappeared. He learned Micah asked at least one impossible question before every meal. "If fish get thirsty, do they drink water?" One evening, all 3 children sat around Rowan while he attempted to assemble a complicated toy rocket. After 20 frustrating minutes, Micah sighed dramatically. "Mom would have finished already." Rowan laughed. "Your mom is smarter than me." Micah nodded seriously. "We know." Even Nia laughed at that. Rowan looked toward her. The sound of her laughter was exactly as he remembered. It hurt and healed him at the same time. He never pressured her for forgiveness. He never spoke about rebuilding their relationship. He understood that trust returned slowly, if it returned at all. So he showed up every morning, every meal, every school event, every doctor's appointment, every bedtime story. He became dependable before asking to be loved. Months passed. The partnership between Ashcroft Quantum Systems and Lumera Biotech Solutions transformed healthcare across multiple countries. Rather than competing, both companies combined engineering with medical innovation to build portable hospitals for underserved regions. The project became an international model for ethical business cooperation. Reporters repeatedly asked how 2 rival CEOs had formed such extraordinary trust. Neither discussed the past, they simply pointed toward the work. One autumn afternoon, Rowan received an invitation from Belhaven Criminal Court. Vivian Mercer had accepted a plea agreement. She requested one final meeting before sentencing. Nia offered to accompany him. He shook his head. "This is something I need to finish alone." Vivian looked older inside the prison meeting room. Not because of time, because bitterness had finally consumed everything else. She looked at Rowan through the glass partition. "Did she forgive you?" Rowan answered honestly. "Not completely." Vivian smiled sadly. "I thought if she disappeared, you'd eventually love me." Rowan looked at her with quiet compassion. "Love isn't something you win by destroying another person." She lowered her eyes. "I know that now." Silence lingered between them. Finally, Rowan stood. "I hope one day you find peace." Vivian didn't answer. She simply watched him leave, realizing too late that obsession had cost her the very life she wanted. Months turned into a year. One warm summer evening, Micah, Elias, and Mara prepared a surprise picnic on the beach with Eleanor. They insisted Rowan help, despite his complete lack of decorating talent. "Dad," Micah groaned. "The sandwiches aren't supposed to look like triangles fighting each other." Rowan laughed. "I'm trying." Mara carefully rearranged the blanket while Elias secretly placed wildflowers into a glass jar. When everything was ready, Nia walked down the path toward the beach. She stopped in surprise. "What's all this?" Micah grinned. "Family dinner." As the sun slowly disappeared beneath the horizon, the six of them sat together sharing stories, laughter, and far too many burnt marshmallows. After the children chased waves along the shore, Eleanor quietly stood. "I'll take them collecting shells." She smiled knowingly before walking away with the triplets, leaving Rowan and Nia alone for the first time in months. The ocean rolled gently onto the sand. Rowan looked at the horizon. "I spent years believing success meant building the biggest company in the room." He shook his head. "I was wrong." Nia listened quietly. "The greatest thing I'll ever build is sitting over there looking for seashells." She followed his gaze. A soft smile appeared. "They're remarkable." He looked back at her. "Because of you." Silence settled comfortably between them. Rowan reached into his pocket and removed the tiny seashell Micah had given him the first day they met. He had carried it every day since. "I keep this to remind myself that grace is a gift, not a right." Nia stared at the shell before looking into his eyes. "You've changed." He nodded. "Because losing you forced me to become the man I should have been before I ever met you." She took a slow breath. "I don't know what the future looks like," Rowan answered gently. "Neither do I." Another quiet moment passed before Nia reached across the blanket and took his hand. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was something far more valuable. It was trust beginning again. Rowan didn't squeeze her hand. He simply held it with gratitude. The children suddenly came running back toward them, shouting excitedly, "Look what we found!" Elias held up a perfectly shaped starfish before carefully returning it to the water. Mara carried a heart-shaped stone. Micah proudly waved another colorful kite. "Family picture," he shouted. "Everybody together." They gathered near the shoreline, while Eleanor balanced the camera on a driftwood log. "Ready?" she called. The children crowded between Rowan and Nia. Micah wrapped an arm around his father's waist. Mara leaned against her mother. Elias held both their hands. At the exact moment the camera clicked, the triplets all laughed together. The sound echoed across the ocean, like a promise that some broken things really could become beautiful again. Not because the past disappeared, but because love finally became stronger than it. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sea with gold, Nia looked at Rowan. He smiled back. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, not as a man trying to erase yesterday, but as a father grateful for today, and a man willing to spend the rest of his life earning tomorrow. If this story reminded you that trust is precious, truth always finds its way into the light, and genuine love is proven through actions more than words, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes that, even after the deepest betrayal, a life rebuilt with honesty can become even more beautiful than the one that was lost.
They say one mistake can destroy a lifetime. But what if that mistake cost a man his own family? 5 years ago, Billionaire CEO Rowan Ashcroft fired his most loyal assistant, Nia Ellison, after believing a carefully planned lie. He never knew she walked out of his office carrying a secret that would change both of their lives forever. She disappeared without asking for revenge, without asking for justice, and without telling him she was pregnant. 5 years later, the doors to Rowan's office opened again. Standing there was the woman he thought he'd never see again. And beside her were 3 beautiful children with the same unmistakable eyes as his. In a single heartbeat, his perfect world began to collapse. But the biggest shock wasn't that he had children. It was discovering someone had stolen 5 years he could never get back. Was it already too late to fix the greatest mistake of his life? Watch until the end, because this story proves that the truth always finds its way home.